Everybody, as we all get settled. Thank you so much for joining us on this beautiful spring evening. Now, there's a lot of pull on your time these days, and we are just so excited that you're here to celebrate Women's History with us tonight, where we will be working on listening and understanding and really enjoying the company of some incredible women in our community. Tonight's panel is celebrating trans women as we celebrate Women's History Month. Just by the skin of our teeth, the end of March, it's still Women's History Month. So we're really excited to have an incredible panel joining us tonight. Just to introduce myself, I'm Rachel Ikaza, and I use she, her pronouns. I'm the Education Initiatives Librarian for Sonoma County Library, and I've lived in Sonoma County my whole life. In fact, when I was in high school, I volunteered at the National Women's History Project, which was at that time in the early 90s, was headquartered in Windsor in a big warehouse. And that organization is responsible for really founding the idea of celebrating women's history in the United States. And one of our amazing panelists is going to have a little more information for you about that in just a moment. That experience that I had celebrating women's history, learning about small business and educational work, led me directly to attend a women's college. I went to Mills College in Oakland, and that too has become a really interesting concept when we think about who can attend a women's college. Do you have to be biologically female from birth? Do we welcome trans women in women's colleges and women's spaces? Some really interesting discussions about that, some inclusivity work and some work to be done. So I'm going to hand the panel over to a very able person. Janna Barkin is going to be facilitating our discussion tonight. Janna is an incredible author and activist in our community, and I'm going to give the mic to Janna. Just an FYI to everybody too, before I give the floor to Janna, this is a safe space. We're going to be talking about some things that might push you a little bit, might make you feel a little uncomfortable. And I invite you just to kind of take a breath about that. And, your questions are very welcome here, but it is a safe space where we might be, getting into some territory that you're unfamiliar with or that feels really at home and welcoming for you. So wherever you lay on that spectrum, know that you're in a safe room here in our virtual room. We do have the chat open. My amazing colleague Rose is going to be taking charge of that chat and making sure that we acknowledge questions and anything that needs attending there. But otherwise, Janna is going to lead our discussion and welcome our amazing panelists. So thank you so much for joining us, everybody. Janna, take it away.
Thank you, Rachel, and thanks to the library, the Sonoma County Library, for hosting us and welcoming us back. So I say us because I have been doing a few programs over the years, Megan and her team, and we were remembering that 2 years ago, just around this time, we had our first in-person events together. And then, of course, we all know what happened. And then we did a wonderful online presentation last year that had a great turnout. Thank you, everyone. And this year, we were invited back to especially highlight trans women during Women's History Month. And as I was introduced, I'm Janna, she, her pronouns, and I'm here as the mom of a transgender person. And I tell my story just briefly tonight because I really want to get to the panelists. But my story is widely available in the book, He's Always Been My Son, a mother's story about raising her transgender son. And I do believe the library has some copies, as does the Marin County one, if you're tuning in there. And it's available. And I'll send you a signed copy. Get in touch. All right. So I wrote about our story. My son, from an early age, we might call this child a tomboy, or gender nonconforming was a word that some people used back then. Gender expansive came along, gender creative. Anyway, my kid was like tomboy to the max, is what I would say. And being the quote progressive preschool teacher I've been for many, many years, I just let my kid be my kid. He was assigned female at birth. We'll talk about feminism tonight. I'm a staunch feminist. Very early on in my life, in my adult life, I became involved in the women's movement and pro-choice work. And I do believe that that background helped me to understand that being transgender is just another beautiful way of being human. And so, in helping my child, my difficulty wasn't in understanding that transgender is a way of being, but what that meant and how and where I could get the resources to support and help my child. And he transitioned in early high school. He's 24 now. He gives us permission to talk about him, for me to share his story. And the famous line I use right now is he says, "Mom, you think about gender way more than I do." And I think that's really cool. And I'm really happy to be doing that. I'm a teacher, I'm an educator, and I really love to be with people and to hear each other's stories and to share stories. So as a cisgender woman, I've learned so much from trans people sharing their stories with me. And that is how I really came to understand how to help my son, was meeting trans people and seeing trans people live beautiful, healthy lives and thinking, you know what? My son deserves that too. Doesn't everyone? So, without further ado, I want to introduce our beautiful panel, and each will say some about herself, and then we'll come back to Cassie, who will give us a little bit of history of women's history and women's history in Sonoma. But I'm going to start with Jennifer tonight. Will you unmute and introduce yourself?
Absolutely. Hello, everybody. I'm Jennifer Rihl. I do use she, her pronouns. I've started my transition when I was 36 in 2016. And yeah, I work as a property manager here in Sonoma County. I've lived here in Sonoma County for the last 11 years, originally from Sacramento, and happy to be a part of this.
So grateful to have you here
Oh,
and to
wait,
meet you. Please,
sorry.
you don't
One
have
more.
to apologize.
I also am the co-chair for Trans Life Sonoma County, which is an organization that we put on a conference every year for transgender folks here in Sonoma County, Marin, Lake County as well. So we do that every year in an effort to build community, get our community is so small that it's nice to be able to actually meet other transgender people, and through Trans Life, that's our goal.
Thank you. And if someone, one of the moderators perhaps can help us find the link for that, we could add it to my note in the chat. I just want to make sure it was there. Thank you for mentioning that important conference that I have yet to be able to attend, but have heard such good things about. So thank you. And perhaps we can mention more of that as we go on. All right. And how about Cassie?
Good evening, everybody. I'm Cassandra May Albaugh. I'm a journalist with the Community Voice in Roanoke Park. I'm also an educator, equal opportunity diversity activist, and a retired military officer. I'm a late in life trans lesbian. Started my journey in my mid-50s trying to discover my authentic self. But didn't start my medical transition and social transition until 5 years ago in 2017. My pronouns are she and her, and I'm one of those you can ask me anything, because I believe if you're afraid to ask a question because you're afraid you'll offend somebody, you will never be able to understand and learn and join the journey with us.
Thank you. So I really love how you point that out, that yes, sometimes people that I work with in parent support groups, they feel afraid that they might offend those of us who are leading the group if they, or the other parents in the room, if they say the wrong thing. And we really try to encourage them, just as you did. I so appreciate that. And there might be questions that some people don't want to answer, even in a panel. And at the same time, this is a panel where we're inviting you to ask tricky questions because we're creating this space together. So thank you, Cassie. All right. And how about Cammie?
All right, it's my turn. Hello, everybody. So good to see everyone. Oh, I love the faces. Some familiar ones too. Nice to see you. So yes, my name is Cammie Duvall. I use she, her pronouns, but I identify as awesome. If any of you must know, for those of you that don't know, I should say. For the sake of this, yes, I am a trans woman, and I too am a transbian, as I like to refer to myself as. I also transitioned later in life. For me, I mean, it wasn't like a teen that we're kind of seeing a lot more freedom to do nowadays. I was in my late 20s. I met my first trans person and was like, there it is. That's it. All right. And I kind of was just light bulb went off and here I am. So I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist. I've been working with the predominantly youth. Last decade, I've really made this shift to working with parents. I co-facilitate with Jana, in Marin. And yeah, I have a whole bunch of other things that I'm really involved in. I am very involved in community and theater work. I do all sorts of other fun things. I won't get on that, but I'm really involved in the athletic world. I am I'm a full-time softball player. I pretty much travel the country playing all the time when I'm not doing one of my 500 other projects. But right now, the discussion about trans women in sports and in places and traditional stuff is really big right now. And I sit on the board of directors for the San Francisco Gay Softball League, which is a really big worldwide thing. We had our World Series in Paris a couple of years ago in France. So, but we're creating these safe spaces, and my role there is as a diversity chair to make sure that trans people feel safe playing in the communities that they feel safe playing in. So, anyway, go on and on, but I won't. Thank you all for coming. We'll dive in. So, yay.
Yay, thank you. And yes, I'm so glad Cammie mentioned that we facilitate together. So if we have little inside jokes, no, I'm just kidding. But I just love when you tell us another adjective of how you identify, right? And so even the title for tonight, Trans Women as Women, well, of course, because trans women are women. And I would love to hear Cassie's brief history of women's history in Sonoma.
Well, the origins, some people would say go way back to International Women's Day, which was someplace in Europe started. But for the United States, Women's History Month, and this is from an article I published in 2020, was the Education Task Force of Sonoma County. That's us. The commission was on the status of women, and they initiated a Women's History Week in 1978. And the event was very successful, and it was recognized as a successful event in 1979 at a conference on women's history that was held at Sarah Lawrence College. And that led to similar celebrations at other institutions and nationwide. Then in 1980, President Jimmy Carter issued a presidential proclamation declaring the week of 8 March as Women's History Week. And then Congress did a one-up on him, and they declared the entire month of March as Women's History Month in 1987. And that's where we were and how we got here.
Wow, is what I said. And thank you, Cassie. I'm always amazed how you can take some words and put them into something we can understand and quickly process. Yeah. And so, in thinking about the history of trans women in the county, I personally didn't find a lot of information on that. And I wonder if any of the panelists might offer something. I know that in San Francisco, trans women were essential in the Compton's cafeteria protests, and but I would say that the history is not shared as much as perhaps Stonewall. So I'll leave it up to each of you. Perhaps anyone could come in and just, you might not have the information even, but saying a few words about this perhaps is good now.
Yeah, I think trans history is seldom recorded. You know, there's a couple different factors in that. One, there's just so few of us. I believe a recent study in 2021, a worldwide study, showed that there was only about 2% worldwide population, at least, that self-identified as transgender, gender fluid, non-binary, gender non-conforming. So that makes up a very small amount of our population. And because just our very existence sort of flies in the face of so many different religions, I think our voices have been canceled for a very, very long time. It was really only in the 20th century that you started hearing, you know, names like Lily Elba, Christine Jorgensen, and that was in, I think Elba was in the 20s and 30s, and Christine Jorgensen was in the late 40s and 50s. The Stonewall riots in 1969, you know, Marsha P. Johnson had a very influential role in that. And then Renee Richards was a household name in, I believe it was 1976. She was the first openly transgender woman who competed in the US Women's Open tennis tournament. And then aside from that, really in Sonoma County, there's not a whole lot that I'm aware of. I'm aware, let's see, there was a doctor, Dr. Danielle Kaufman, who was the chief of nuclear medicine for Kaiser here in Santa Rosa. She was an author, contributor to Huffington Post. She had written a book called Untying the Knot, where after she had come out to her wife as a gay man in 2009, that's the very same day her wife came out as a lesbian. And while they separated, they did remain married and remain friends. And then in 2012, Danielle legally changed her name to Danielle and began her transition into a woman, into the woman that she's always been. Unfortunately, that didn't last very long, as she was found dead in her home in September of 2013. There's not a whole lot that I was able to confirm online, but one of the things that I hear through the trans community is that her death was a catalyst for Kaiser becoming one of the leading transgender health providers in the state of California. A little bit more, the organization that I work for, a doctor here in Sonoma County named Sugi Tamar Mattis was the foremost gender specialist here in the county. She had noticed that there was really a desperate need for the trans community to find each other. And she, along with several other volunteers, started the Trans Life organization and started the conferences on an annual basis and a professional symposium as well. Unfortunately, well, I mean, she's since moved on and moved away from Sonoma County, but many of the same individuals who helped start that organization are still there on the committee that I'm now co-chair of. And lastly, I don't think you can mention transgender history in Sonoma County without mentioning Jackie Nugent, who is here in attendance. I believe she began her transition in the early 2000s, and she may correct me, but she also started the Transgender North Bay support group, which was my introduction into this lifestyle. I couldn't have done it without her help and guidance, and she's truly one of my heroes and somebody that I can call a friend.
Well, I am so glad that you had all that information to offer us. Thank you. And also welcome, Jackie, because I wasn't sure if you'd be able to make it tonight, and so glad you're able to be here. So thank you, Jennifer. And so we can hear that there's these times where there have been people who have shared their stories, even though not much was known. And like you said, many different reasons why the story about trans women and trans people in general has just been, well, not just, but pushed down, pushed aside, and covered. And through the last 10 years, even, that I've been having my eyes opened and my mind opened, there's been such change. And so I do hear this, especially as a person, this distinction of what makes a woman or a person who is, like you said, not, she's becoming the person she is, right? It's like she's affirming rather than changing who she is, though there are changes she's making. So I wonder if we could talk a little bit about, this title tonight, even trans women as women. For me, trans women are women. But there are people who maybe want to debate that or even maybe have different ideas about that. So I wonder, I'll invite Cammie in just because we haven't heard from you much yet. And we'll start with you. Just what does that mean to you, or does it mean something to you when we say trans rights are women's rights or women's rights are trans rights?
Wow, give me the loaded question right off the bat. Okay, no, I'm just kidding. I can handle it. It's all good.
You're awesome.
Okay,
of course you can.
I have my own experiences and unique stuff. It's really, really important that everyone knows that I'm not here to speak for Cassie or for Jennifer or for anybody else in their experience. Okay, I think it's important that we all just keep reminding ourselves there are as many different ways to express a transgender identity as there are people who identify as transgender. Okay, so with that being said, okay, so I had a really interesting experience when I first transitioned, and I came up against such, I'll say the word opposition, whether it be from family, from community. People were supportive of me as I made my decisions, or once the decisions were made, don't get me wrong, but there was a lot of, are you sure? I don't know. Is this just a phase? I could go on and on, right? But for me, it was all received as, this is a bad idea, you shouldn't do this. That was kind of how I interpreted it, for whatever reason, better or for worse, right? So I remember, in order to try to get people to believe me and to really go, I had to swing my pendulum full swing to the other side and be the biggest caricature of a woman that I could possibly be without knowing yet what it meant to be a woman, right? Other than what, I had seen. And so I had to for me, then this was my experience, I had to really be adamant and to not waver, to always be on the ball, always jump to the defense. I am a woman. I live in this world as a female. I navigate as a female. I have hormones coursing through my body that are female. I won't go into, into every little detail, but I am also acutely and keenly, trust me, of everybody who reminds me all the time, I am more aware than not that I am not a cisgendered assigned female at birth woman, but that doesn't make me any less of a woman. And that's where I feel like this argument and this discussion that's happening a lot is where it comes down to everybody has kind of a different interpretation of what it means to be a woman, right? Yeah, half my family is on the other side of the aisle, we'll put it that way. And so I have this discussion with them a lot. And they're always like, oh yeah, well, you've got your genetics and your genes. And so that's the only thing that makes, us different, or it's just these like 2 chromosomes that may or may not have letters that are, anyway. Point being, when we kind of step back and we broaden our perspective and our ideology, our ideas of what being a woman is, what womanhood is, and kind of get down to some of those core concepts that may be different for every person in this room, but I bet you we could agree on a lot of them. And I bet you that we find a lot more common ground than we would uncommon ground. And it's not about invading anybody's spaces. I can see the fear that people would have, but to me, that's ridiculous. I'm not here to invade anyone's space. I just want to be, let's just have fun together. Let's be friends. Anyway, I'll let some other panelists jump in, but those are just kind of some of my initial thoughts. It's a big question. It's kind of hard to answer in just a quick snap, but that's where I go with it. So,
thank you. Cassie, do you have anything you'd like to add?
Sure. I self-identify as a trans woman. Why do I put trans in front of woman? Because I am a woman. I may have been born as a male, but I was always different when I was growing up. And so being a woman is who I really am. It took me a hell of a long time to figure that out because of society on it. But people, it's like you say, hey, my doctor, he's a Black doctor. They need that adjective to try to kind of pigeonhole us. It shouldn't matter, but it's a way to organize thinking on it. And I chose, just like many minority communities, I chose to take the word back and proudly use that word as trans on it. I know, as Cammie has said, that all our journeys are different. We have many similarities as we go through our journeys, but each of our journeys is unique. We each make decisions, but one of those decisions that folks should understand, being trans is not a choice. It is who I am. In fact, if I could choose, given all the consequences of being different, I might choose not to be trans. But that is who I am. Now, that doesn't mean there's not choices, because there are choices. As you embrace or reject or choose this or choose that, you have to make choices and determine the consequences of those choices, because there's a lot of fear about change. And when you make a choice, there's consequences to those decisions on it. But yeah, my rights don't take away from your rights. In fact, by giving equality of rights, we reinforce everybody's rights on it. So trans rights are human rights. Trans rights are also Black rights. They are also Jewish rights. It's a diverse community, and I always say that our diversity factor is only but a small percentage of who we are, and it's the other 95% of who we are as parents and grandparents, as lawyers, doctors, teachers, etc., that make us human beings. So stop focusing on the small sliver of our differences and focus on the similarities that we all share. And we share similarities as women in our choices. That's why trans women are women.
Thank you so much. Jennifer, would you like to add or even converse in a way?
You know, I don't know that I could say anything more that Cammie and Cassie so eloquently put it. But yeah, sort of echoing them, feminism is about inclusivity, and it's including all women. And in this age, we need to recognize that trans women are women. So yes, you know, trans rights are women's rights. I think that there is a lot of debate in society. There's a lot of there's a sect of feminism that we in our community, we call them TERFs, which is trans exclusionary radical feminists, who wholeheartedly don't believe that trans women have a place in feminism. But I had to earn my femininity, and it cost a lot. It cost a marriage. It cost financially. You know, I used to be fairly upper middle class, and you know, I didn't really have to worry about money that much. Now it's on the forefront of my mind, and it's painful. You know, a lot of and not every trans woman has to go through surgeries or different procedures, but a lot do, and I've chosen to. And some of the procedures that I've had, I can tell you, are extremely painful. And yeah, I feel that I've earned it.
Yeah. I so appreciate what you said about being about inclusivity. And for me, when I first heard the phrase, I think I was at the Women's March, and trans rights are women's rights. And I thought about that. And I also thought about the different universities. We were talking about this before we got on, and the panel had our chat before, and how there have been women's universities. Rachel, I think it was you who mentioned you went to Mills. Yeah. And that piece about different universities deciding how they will work with trans people, because of course there's people who are assigned female at birth that perhaps transition but haven't changed their birth records, and so does that count for them? And then there's people who transition in place, and so there's a lot of thinking around that, and many of the schools have opened up from what I understand, but I think it is still challenging, and points out, like you said, Jennifer, you had to earn it, you know, and yet you were born with it, and yet, as Cassie also pointed out, society didn't really give you the guidance toward that self. And that's what this type of educational event, you know, really strives to do, is to be inclusive and to help people understand. You know, each of you transitioned in mid-adulthood, perhaps even later, but not as teens, which I know there are some parents here. But I wonder if any of you or each of you might want to share something about more, because you've already shared some, but something about how your understanding of your own gender grew over time. You know, I'm cisgender, so I got all these messages about how to be a woman. And I guess for me, I was never questioned about, you know, I was never told, how do you know? And when I thought about that, it was a lot about, well, I just have this inner feeling. And that's what I hear from trans people. There's an inner feeling. Might one of you want to start the discussion on that?
Oh, I'll jump right in on that.
You go.
Oh, sorry, Jennifer. So if you're wanting to jump in,
You can both.
yeah, but I get asked this all the time because they're like, all right, so like, what did you score on the test? And I'm like, oh, there's a test. Oh, okay, right. But on a serious note, I joke. For me, it was never like it never really manifested in just like oh, I know, I've always known, it's always been this way. For me, it manifested in such a strong desire to be, to express, to kind of engage with that aspect of myself that I did clearly get the message I wasn't supposed to be. You know, that I got those messages when I was young. But just so we know, it wasn't until I had my Wizard of Oz moment after being on hormones for a few months where it really clicked in. I was like, oh yeah, this is it. Okay, clearly I'm going down this road. For me, it was just driven by just such a strong desire that was really impacting my daily life in a lot of negative ways that were not helpful for me. And I didn't really know, I didn't put the two together. So anyway, just to kind of jump on that, sometimes we have this innate just understanding or knowing that something fits better, but not, I'm definitely not going to speak for everyone, but I'm sure I can speak for many of us in here. Most of us just didn't have the language when we were younger or the concepts. Otherwise, who knows, right? But pass the buck.
Mm-hmm. And Jennifer?
Yeah, I knew I was different from other little boys when I was about 4 years old. I remember a time when I was, my mother would bathe my sister and I together. And I remember an instant where, you know, we were bathing and I had mentioned to my mom that I think I'm supposed to be a girl. I'm supposed to look like her. And let's just say I was made aware that those feelings were definitely different. And I don't think my mom reacted any differently than any other American mom in 1984 would have done. But that interaction made me really realize how different the feelings that I felt were. And so I didn't bring it up again until I was 36. But I knew that I was different. I, you know, see the clothes and the toys that, you know, girls would play with. And I'll tell you, I had gender dysphoria badly. So much so that, I mean, I couldn't go 5 minutes without thinking about how uncomfortable I was in my body. And that made getting through school pretty hard, especially in high school. Beautiful women maturing, and that was a tough time in my life. And luckily, I made it through adulthood without, you know, harming myself. Although I got very close once. But it's torturous, going through your life, just knowing every time you see another woman, you're just jealous of her. And it's hard, and it's a torture that I don't wish on my worst enemies. And I guess how I knew it was so innate was being a man didn't come natural to me. I sort of I had a very ultra masculine persona. You know, I used to hunt and chew tobacco and fish and, you know, all that, and, you know, chase women and whatnot. But I kind of made every decision I would sort of, you know, my innate decision was, you know, what Jenny would normally, or Jennifer, sorry, would want to, you know, think. But I had to mentally project myself, well, what would a man's man do in this situation? And that was sort of the persona that I adopted. And after transitioning, I didn't find it hard to adopt the mannerisms and ways women act, because that's just who I was.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that. I have not heard that just that way. And I love that because, of course, as each of the panelists have said, each trans person's story is unique. Just like each of us, regardless of our gender identity, we all have these unique stories. And hearing that piece of how it was easier for you, how you did feel more natural in expressing yourself as the woman you are when you shared this very personal part of yourself with the world. Cammie taught me the words, rather than thinking of coming out, there's a letting in. And thank you for letting us in to your story. And someone wrote in the chat, thank you for sharing these stories with us. It's not easy to share our personal stories, regardless of who we are and what our situation is. It takes someone particularly to get up on a stage like this, the Zoom stage. So thank you for sharing, Cammie and Jennifer. And Cassie, I wonder if you want to add something as well.
Sure. I am the elder here. 8 decades I've lived. I was born in the early 50s, and LGBTQ wasn't discussed. So I knew I was different, but there was no gay straight alliances, there was no mentors, there were no role models, there was nothing in the library that was safe for you to go in and research why you were different. I used to wonder as a teen, I had a lot of girl friends. We'd sit and talk, and we were always comfortable around, but no one saw me as a boy friend. And I couldn't understand that. I was always in the big brother mode on it. So, but in hindsight, I can understand it. I was one of the girls, but I didn't know that at the time on it. And so I was just beginning to explore my differences when I had a significant emotional event, which was the sudden passing of my mother when I was 16. And my life stopped. We didn't have grief counselors. We had the usual bromides from family and priest and everything else. And I just went into an emotional shutdown. There was no more exploring to be done. It was surviving. And my dad remarried. I picked up some siblings, stepsisters and stepbrothers, and we moved from where we were born and raised to a different state. It was dysfunctional. And then my dad and I agreed that I wanted to go back to college. So the military was the way for me to go to get the GI Bill. So I raised my right hand, was only going to do 4 years, and went to the United States Coast Guard. And of course, in recruit training and in the military, you don't want to share your internal demons. You want to conform. You want to do what the other folks do. And I played that role. I always equated to being an actor. You put on the role that you've been assigned. And the better you are at that role, the more applause you get. The difference in putting up that facade to protect yourself and being an actor in a role is when the play is over, you can take the role off. I couldn't take the role off. I had to do those things. I got married, I had kids, I had to live up to responsibilities. I couldn't deal with these demons, so I stuffed them down. And my spouse and I dealt with them. And I guess it was in the 70s, Masters and Johnson came out with this book called Joy of Sex. And there was a chapter on cross-dressers. And I went, oh, that explains it. No, there was no sexual gratification, but it was a rationale. And I went through all the same things: buy, have shame and guilt, intertransphobia is the term now, purge, go 5-6 months, go buying again, go through the same cycle. And the older I got, the more frequent those cycles were. And layered on top of that was the fear. If this becomes public, my career's over. I won't be able to provide for my family. You know, people will think I'm a pervert, whatever. So it wasn't until I retired from the military and actually got online in 2007 to try to figure out, what is this? What's going on? That I even heard the word transgender. And it took me 3 years, what I later learned was called the emotional transition, 3 years to accept myself, because I read the stories of other trans women and say, well, that makes sense, but that's not quite right for me. But even after I accepted myself in 2010, what do you do about it? Successful career, you got a family, you got kids, you got grandkids. What do you do about it? There's consequences. So I stuffed it down, tried to do little things, grow my hair, paint my toenails. Nobody could see it with my socks on, just to touchstones for my femininity. In 2013, it all fell apart because I had a heart attack. I had tried to stuff it down and cope with it. And my body told me, you can't do this anymore. And I had to bite the bullet and make the decision. I could continue to try to have the facade and stuff it down and wait for the next one to be the big one, or I could transition. And I decided I'd transition. It's not that easy. Had to get prepared. I had to be able to take care of my spouse. I didn't want to transition in the workforce. I wanted to get out of debt. So for the next 4 years, that's what I did. But my survival was, I know it's going to happen. I know it's going to happen. Started to get my body in better shape, started getting ready to do the transition. And then I had to go through the gatekeeping, getting an appointment for the transgender clinic and going through those steps. So it wasn't until 2017 that I started my medical transition, separated from my spouse of 48 years, and started my social transition in late 2017 on it. So that was my story. Always knew I was different. Didn't know why until late in life. And now here I am, 71, smiling and happy, because for the first time in my life, I can be me, not what people expect me to be.
Wow. Thank you. It isn't easy. And I hear that through each of your stories and countless others. And I know that it can be so difficult to transition in place, as we say, as adults with families. Some couples can stay together, some don't. Some people share this part of their lives that is so important and personal with coworkers. Some don't. And you've highlighted a little bit about that, each of you talking about, Jennifer mentioning your economics changing. And what I've learned is that trans women do have a harder time economically. And I wonder if we could talk a little bit about what are some of the challenges, because of course this could be a whole discussion that could take many hours. What are some of the challenges in the workplace, and perhaps what people can do? You know, I know that a lot of people are here because they want to help make it a better world. You know, we want to learn from each other in order to create more ease and more equality and more inclusion and more equity and diversity. So what is it that people can do right now, or that trans people might need in the workplace, in our public spaces, that's so important to living healthy, happy lives?
I I think for allies who want to support this community, especially in the workplace, is employ us first and foremost. One of the things that is a very, I'm not saying this happens with everybody, but very common amongst the trans community is that we are either unemployed or woefully underemployed. And just having a steady paycheck can go a long way. Most of us in our community actually aspire to just having a paycheck to paycheck style job. I mean, that's a sad truth about our community. Like I said, I'm not saying everybody's like that. I'm one of the fortunate people that I have a good job and I've never been unemployed. This my transition did it didn't quite cost me a job, but I knew that the last job I had, it would be uncomfortable. So I found another job. I went to work as a man on a Tuesday, took a day off, got my nails and hair done, and did some shopping with my mom on Wednesday. And I went to work as a woman and started my life on that following Thursday. At a company very similar as another property management company. And for me, that worked. I don't know that transitioning in my existing job, I mean, I'm sure it would have been possible and possible for many. But for me, I think it was the best decision to just end this one chapter of my life and go on to another. But as far as the workplace goes, yes, employ trans people. Don't have preconceived biases against them. I think a lot of employers think about, oh man, you know, if I hire this trans person, am I just opening the door for liability? You know, is this going to mean a lawsuit, or one of my other employees going to, you know, harass this person? And I wish that those topics didn't come to the forefront of many employers' minds. The other thing, gender neutral bathrooms in employment places. I really can't stress that enough.
Thank you. Of course, I was hoping someone would bring up the bathroom thing. You know, as a person who has gone to many a place where, you know, obviously the women's rooms tend to be the much longer rooms. You know, why can't it just be bathrooms for all, you know? And I really do love that there are more single stall bathrooms than ever before. I think there are many people who need privacy in the bathroom, not just trans people, not just you know, people with disability or different abilities, or even some medical needs. There's also, of course, the idea of families being able to go regardless of gender, a parent being able to support their child. And also, I think for people who might be uncomfortable for whatever reason with others, no matter who they are in the bathroom, why can't we have more private places to do something that our society clearly considers a private thing? And if you're in the bathroom with somebody and you're not sure of their gender, don't worry, they usually know where they're supposed to be. So, yeah. And I appreciate that. And who else would like to talk about this? What is needed in the workplace? How was it to transition in place? And how could employers perhaps make that be more smooth?
So one of the things that is kind of not really talked a lot about, but is a very big reality in the workplace for trans people. So just brief history lesson, being trans or like to get services, healthcare, etc., we all have to have a diagnosis, right? That's kind of how our healthcare system works. So currently, the diagnosis that someone who's struggling with gender dysphoria is gender dysphoria, we severe and et cetera, et cetera. But it used to, just like, I guess it's been like 6 or 7 years now, a whole long time, clearly, it used to be known as gender identity disorder. Oh, wow. So me walking around the world, kind of like Cassie had mentioned earlier, just me existing, I'm a disorder. Oh, exciting. Yay. Do I get a book named after me too? No, unfortunately, it doesn't work that way. So this idea and this concept that, oh, wow, we can't hire this transgender person because they're going to be anxious, depressed. They are a walking mental disorder. So they're going to be out all the time. They're not going to be able to be productive. So that's a ticking time bomb we're not going to mess with. That's a very, very real reality that employers think, particularly employers that haven't gotten past a lot of the stigma of mental health, because that still very much exists, let alone the stigma around that. But being trans, ironically, for many of us transitioning, oh, now I can finally work with all of those other disorders that society kind of, me not being able to be myself, resulted in, right? So yeah, there is a reality that many of us who transition and who navigate the world as transgender people, there is a reality of us that many of us do have some baggage that we had to work with, some trauma that we have to heal from growing up and not being who we were. But just being us isn't automatically like a disorder, isn't automatically going to require specific treatment and this and that. So I know the reason I bring this up is because I see in my office that trans people, not just trans women, but trans people, have to work twice as hard just to kind of meet the baseline expectations of everybody else. And it sucks, and I call it out all the time. I have to be careful. I don't want it to come back on me, but at the same time, it's important. And for anybody who does not identify as trans, who might identify as cis or otherwise, help be a voice and an advocate when you see something that, like, oh, that didn't feel very good. I wonder if, I bet that probably wouldn't feel very good for them, would it? No. Okay, well, maybe I need to speak up, because remember, the three of us can come in here, we can tell you these amazing stories. Really inspire. We can all inspire you. I guarantee you. The journey that we have to do in the world to find ourselves is inspiring enough, but it won't compare to the amount of power that your voice as a non-trans person will have to a company or an agency or something who is also non-trans, right? It's just that peer thing. So you all have so much power to help, just like as women, when we all speak up for other women, right? To bring it back to that point where we're stronger together. I'm gonna get off my soapbox because you're getting me all on it, but yeah, just remember that mental health stigma, that's a real big thing. We need to work on getting rid of that everywhere, not just the workplace.
So I'll just jump in and add 3 points of view. First of all, I was privileged to be financially secure because of my career and my pension and stuff. So a job wasn't critical to me. But what it leads to, what the thread is normalizing us as people, seeing us as human beings, not as the other. And whether that's housing or employment, medical care, whatever, when that happens, good things follow. It's when you other us that things start to happen. And that goes into the mental health thing. Let's flip the script. Are transgender people mentally in stress? Or is the lack of affirmation and acceptance what leads to the depression and the alcohol and the things that we cope because no one's accepting us? So flip the script. It is a symptom of the problem. It isn't the problem. All right. many people get the blues or bipolar or have these things, and yes, there is a stigma to it on it, but we need to work through that. And that leads to what the 31st is. Visibility is important. People need to see us as us. One of the decisions I made when I went public was I wasn't running away from him. I was running to me. And I had to make that decision. How public am I going to be? And as an educator and an advocate, my decision was easy. I want to be visible and promote and active so that the generations that follow me don't have to go through this. So allies, be visible with us. Don't make it all about us having to educate, us having to navigate. Join us and educate and navigate with us. As one of my good friends who is here tonight says, it doesn't make a difference. It shouldn't make a difference. But we're not there yet.
That's right. That makes me think of, well, there's a few ways I could go because you all made such prescient points. This importance of the next generation. And when, oh, Skylar, it'll be your birthday. I'm looking at the chat before I go into my next thing. Tyler says, Trans Visibility Day just happens to fall on my birthday, Skylar says. And Skylar is a proud trans man. Thank you for vocally inviting us in, and happy birthday. It's coming up. Yes. And parents also feel this, Cammie, what you were talking about perhaps, and I think what Cassie and Jennifer all referred to, this piece of not knowing, and then society having fear of the unknown. And also there is a lot of transphobia, and this, especially these days, is very forefront. And those of you who are part of the SPAR Center community in Marin, we just put out a Sparkle, which is our newsletter, the Sparkle. And if you're not on that list and you'd like to be, my email's in the chat somewhere, but I'll put it again. I'm happy to help you get on that list. And anyway, we had a specific Sparkle about Transgender Day of Visibility, and I was invited to write an article about the current events, yeah? And so this type of vitriol, you know, you can't say gay, making it, you know, a cause for calling Child Protective Services and calling it child abuse when parents are simply listening to their children. It reminds me of when I was a parent. Well, I am a parent, but when I was a parent of my very young child, second grade, and we went to the parent-teacher conference, and I'm so excited, and I'm going to talk to this teacher, and we're going to hear all about my child. And what I didn't hear about as much was my child, and it was more about what parent was saying about my child, what another parent was saying. And the teacher was and is an ally, and brought this to my attention and wanted me and my husband to know that she supported us in saying, you know, the parent asked my, again, super max tomboy, right? So we were allowing my child to choose the clothes that most were comfortable. And the parents said, well, why do Amaya's parents make Amaya dress that way? At the time we use she, but we don't. His pronouns are he, him. But at the time it was, why do Amaya's parents let her, or make her, it was make her was the word, dress that way. And I just kept looking like, make? Like Cassie mentioned, you know, choice? Like maybe the choice is easier to not be the one who stands out, the one who everyone's going, what? They're transgender? Oh, you know, parents get the, oh, you're transgender. And they go, oh, that's nice. That's nice. You know, it's like the smile and nod community. So I think you were talking about this piece. What could be, from people who lived through their childhoods, Each of you spoke about an inner knowing that you weren't able to. Now parents are hearing from their children. In fact, many parents go the opposite way and think that it must be some sort of fad. You know, they like hear it, but they think it's a fad. They think it's a trendy thing. Now, I do say there's a trend. There is a trend that shows us that more and more people are letting us in, that are coming out, that are saying they are transgender, that are affirming they're perhaps non-binary. We haven't really talked about different identities within the trans community. And of course, non-binary rights are trans rights, are human rights. So what could we say to parents when their child is expressing to them, or even just showing us, and we have these parental little inklings, and a lot of people just want to ignore or hope it's gonna go away? How can parents best affirm, support, and I think this is true for schools too. How can we best affirm, support? What were some of the things you might have needed as a child that you would hope, like you said, Cassie, I want to change for the next generation?
Okay, I guess I'll go first. If a parent, if your child is questioning their gender identity, or outright telling you that they are transgender, the first and foremost thing that you need to do is you need to love and support your child. Without a supportive family, the rates of suicide among transgender people are astronomical. I believe it's something like 41% of trans people, or 42%, have either attempted or come very close to attempting suicide. I'm not immune from that. And with a supportive family, had I had the courage to come out to my family and really been persistent with it, and had they shown me the love, and I'm not trying to talk bad about my family, because I mentioned it once when I was 4 and never mentioned it again. So yeah, I think that if I had been persistent and they would have, loved me as they still love me today, I wouldn't have had a suicide attempt, and I would have made this transition a lot earlier. Trans people, they just want to be normal, and the backbone of that is family and the support that they get. So love your kid. Do research, find a support group for them, find a support group for yourself, for parents or family members of trans identifying people. Learn about the community and use the pronouns that they want to be, or that they're using, that they want to use. That's so important.
Thank you. And I know there's PFLAG in Sonoma that is super welcoming to parents of all LGBTQ people of any age. Same with our groups that Cammie and I run. We are open to people who have children of any age. Right now, our group has a range of people who have a child who's 4 and people who have children who are 38. And then even there have been some folks that have been dropping in with 54-year-olds and such. And if you'd like to buy my book through me, you could get a signed copy. And I just left that, and I'll leave the link also where you can find it. It's easily searched. I'll put the name of the book in here. Thank you. Cassie, do you want to say anything about that, about supporting trans youth in schools, in families?
Yes, I know for me, when I came out, the youth didn't have a problem with it. It was their parents. My grandkids, they're their schoolmates, etc. They're used to gender non-conforming in their generation. It's no big deal to them. But they listen to the environment created by their parents that do have a big deal about it. And none of the kids want to go against their parents. So that one adult, that one supportive person does make a difference. I was raised in a very religious fashion on it. So suicide was a sin, and I never seriously considered it, but I can't tell you how many times I went to bed praying to God that I didn't wake up the next morning because I didn't know what to do on it. So the support of your child, watch them. You know, some children will go through a phase, but if they're insistent, persistent, and consistent, and they send those messages over and over and over again, don't deny reality. Love the child. Help them navigate. That's my advice.
Yeah, that's all great advice. I just have one thing I would tack on. And that's as parents, you're going to go through a process too. It's no matter what you do, no matter how much you try to hold your child and protect them, this is something that I tell people, no matter how many people you have surrounding you, it is still one of the loneliest things that we go through just because we have to do it ourselves. And that often means deconstructing ourselves entirely in order to reconstruct ourselves the correct way, right? And as parents, sometimes you have to watch that. And that is really, really hard. So for parents, I think that it's really important that you get the support that you need so that you can be present for your child and be that rock for them. You're going to go through grief. You're going to have all these processes. You're going to guilt. All this stuff is going to happen for you. It's a fairly, or it might not, but fairly normal thing to expect. And don't be hard on yourself as a parent, right? But also on the flip side, once our kid comes out to us, it might be like a big thing for them because it is a big thing, but it is still just a slice of who they are. They probably still love video games. They probably still have a favorite music band that they like or a genre of music. Find ways to connect with your children. You hate video games, whatever, suck it up, sit down and play. Let them destroy you at a video game for 10 minutes if that's what it's going to take for them to open up and start chatting to you, right? So that's a funny example, but just that I found that while I've worked with hundreds of kids, okay, and I can't tell you how many times I have to remind parents, oh yeah, so your son or your daughter or whatever was telling me in session the other day that they won second place at the county track meet. Oh yeah, they did. Oh, did you congratulate them for that or take them out to dinner? Oh, I was so concerned about getting that doctor's appointment for them next week because I don't know what I'm supposed to be doing. Anyway, see, right, this can consume us. It really can, but try to find the balance, okay? I tell people, remember, it's like a pizza. We're all like people. Everyone loves pizza, right? Come on, right? We're all just, we have many different slices that make up our pizza, and this is just one slice. So don't neglect the other slices.
That's right. Thank you. I so appreciate that. And I remember for my son, it was photography, and I love being out in nature. And so I would just go, let's go to the beach, bring your camera. And we were together. We were not always talking, but we had moments of that. There were some questions that some of you sent to me, and I think this one is really, really important. What does someone do if they unintentionally misgender or dead name someone when they're talking about or with a trans person? What would each of you, I mean, this might be different for each person, but what could we say if someone accidentally dead names or misgenders or uses the wrong pronoun? What is the best course of action?
Sorry, Cassie, you want to go ahead?
Sure. So the key word here is accidentally. It happens, you put it in context. Is it truly accidental? Often you just do a simple correction and move on. He was talking she, and move on. And if you're the one that accidentally does it, same thing. Well, he and I went, no, I'm sorry, she and I went, and move on. Don't make a big deal of it, because when you make a big deal of it, then it's no longer about the accident, it's about you, and you don't want to center yourself in it. And my suggestion is, if you have a transgender friend and you're struggling with the pronouns, especially they, because people seem to resent that, they and them, practice that not just in front of your trans friend. Practice it away from your trans friend, and then you won't have those accidents on it. And that's the simplest things to do.
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing. Correct yourself in the moments as soon as you can. Otherwise, if you don't correct yourself in the moment, maybe apologize to that person at another point, and just really make an effort to use those pronouns. I have a 7-year-old son who, he's the best. He never misgenders me, but other people do. I get misgendered on the phone almost every day. Unfortunately, my voice is a little deep and it happens all the time. What I do as a trans person, when somebody else misgenders me, I quickly let them know in the moment that actually my pronouns are she, her, my name is Jennifer. And if they do it again, then I hang up on them. As simple as that.
So I'll just add and throw in this little piece that's I feel you on the phone, Jennifer. Oh, I hate the phone. That's why I was talk on the phone. Stupid phone. Anyway, rabble. But this idea that is it a mistake or is it intentional is really key. I mean, I cast you here, Ryle, knows what that is. This somebody who's even aware that they're doing it? Is it passive aggressive? Is it, or are they trying to maybe put me in my place or let the world know something about it, right? So I personally, for me, I always judge, okay, how valuable is this kind of piece, this friendship, this connection, this person, whatever, right? Because again, it goes along with that idea of we can't control what other people do. I can correct people till I'm blue in the face, but how much attention do I want or energy do I want to spend there? So if it's someone close to me, yeah, I'll correct them. And I'll hope that they correct themselves, look at me, kind of acknowledge I made a mistake and move on. Okay, great. That's all we need, right? Thank you. I see that you got it. But otherwise, a lot, if these are people that I have not invited in to my world, that I have not shared my story with, well, they can say whatever the hell they want to say. Excuse my language. They don't know. They don't know me. And so that I've really tried to adopt that lately. And it's actually gotten a lot easier because it still happens. And it's like 15 years into it all, it's still happening. So you kind of get numb to it a little bit, I guess. But it's hard. It's not always easy. And it depends, of course, on how strong we're feeling on any given day, right? So.
Yeah, Cammie, I've heard you. By the way, Skylar said that he really wants to be your friend, and I wonder if you want to, I'll invite you to tell us a little bit more about the fun things you do, like softball and other amazing things. Super creative. But this piece of, you've talked about like the resilience and standing in one's strength. I think the input that everyone gave us is, if you make a mistake, first of all, note that and practice. So perhaps you don't make the mistake. And then also Correct and move on. Don't overly apologize, because after all, then it puts the onus on the trans person to then make you feel better. Oh, don't worry about it. It's fine. You don't have to say you're sorry. Instead, just say, oh, you're right. I mean to say, and move on. But can we talk about that standing in one's strength? And you talked about sometimes even putting it on until it feels like strength. Yeah.
Oh yeah, so we only have a few minutes left. I'm not going to go down my avenue of discussion on this one too much, because that is a really big question. I would love to hear what some of the other people have to say here, but I will share though that the idea, and this is where actually, this is going to work. I'm going to tie this up really nicely. Okay, so this idea of trans women being women, right? So as a trans woman, I find, or as a human, I find strength and resilience in my community. Okay. As a trans woman, there, as was brought out earlier, there just aren't that many trans people. I mean, I would love it if there were more, but just the reality of it is that people living in the world, it's hard sometimes to find connection within our community. So through it kind of expanding and broadening our communities, whether it be through our hobbies and our interests, or as our shared common ground as women, then, you know, all of a sudden we all have a bigger group that we can pull resilience from, and that we can support each other, and that we can all be stronger. If that's kind of my just little summary of how I feel about resilience, and that it as the trans community grows, we're going to find more resilience. But until then, you know, we have to sometimes look to other aspects, other slices of ourselves to find that. So that I guess that's, we'll sum it up. But I'm curious to hear what others have to say.
Me too.
Well, I'll piggyback on the fact that there's not many of us. Again, I was privileged. I have a wonderful support group I call Cassie's Social Circle. Cisgender women that treat me as me. We go eat, we go shopping, we go to happy hour, we do things together. They attend my trans events to learn more. And that gives you the resilience to have that social support system being with you, that is standing up. Now, yes, we go through the Trans 101 and we have a lot of questions and stuff like that, but pretty soon that's not the purpose of our discussions. We discuss what we're cooking, you know, what we're cleaning, what looks good on us, those type of things, just like normal women.
Because you are normal women. Jennifer.
All right, resilience. I mean, having a support system is key. I was blessed with having a lot of amazing friends, and I really didn't lose any friends once I came out as trans, and it's meant the world to me. I've been very lucky, which is not the norm for transgender people. A lot of people end up losing a lot. I have way more cisgender friends than I do LGBTQIA plus friends. They just keep adding letters to that, but yeah, I do get a lot of resilience from my friends, family. One of the things that I get resilience on is helping others and being part of trans life. You know, when I first started at Jackie's Transgender North Bay support group, I really needed a lot of the support from the other trans women that were in there. However, I kept attending, and I finally found the strength in myself to come out and be who I am. And I found it wasn't so hard anymore. After I came out, it was just kind of, I was who I was. I've always sort of been a confident person, and I didn't let transitioning stop me. And I continued going to the support meetings, because a lot of the times there's a lot of really sad stories, And I remember that being one of the things that was like, wow, do I really want to go through all this? You know, when I first started attending. So I tried to be there to shine a positive light. That being trans isn't so bad. You can make this life, you know, your own. And so I got a lot of resilience on my own just by helping others and being there and sharing my story and all the work that I do with trans life. That means a lot to me, and it gives me a lot of strength.
Thank you. We have just a few more minutes, and I've been inviting folks to put any questions in the comments, but if anyone does have a question for the panel, we invite you.
And maybe one more question, just so we can have a minute to wrap up. Be great.
Yes. I've got loads of them, but I wouldn't mind inviting in the panel. Kenyatta, I think you want to change your name in the actual Zoom, yes? Person letting us know. Kenyatta is your name. Oh, yes, in the Zoom. Yes, another time we can definitely help you do that. And I think that would be a really nice thing to remind me and others who run the Zooms in the future, is just reminding folks of those little details of how to change their names. And thank you for that note. Someone asked, what should I do if my family is misgendering me, even though I have clearly stated that I'm transitioning? Yeah.
Air horn.
Air horn.
Keep it with you. When they do it, they're gonna learn quickly.
So we have both air horn and also someone saying from the chat, have patience. So perhaps both of these, you know, nothing can exist as only. Go ahead, Cammie.
What I would say to the individual who
Yes.
is not the family who's doing all that, is to remember that it's not about you. To remember that this is about them, for likely a fear or something, a misunderstanding, a lack of knowledge about something, and that it's not about you, and that you do not have to engage in that conversation if you don't want to, but if you choose to, remember that it's not about you. That's all.
And again, you have to keep it in context. How valuable is a relationship with your parents, obviously. To use a personal example, I had a brother-in-law that was used to calling me by my male name. And when we were talking, he says, I can't call you by your chosen name. I've known you by your male name all my life. Well, he was a valuable relationship. What was funny is we didn't use names, either one. We didn't use pronouns. We just went without pronouns or out names, and the relationship went on. But I would add, have patience, because it took us years to accept ourselves. Those around us are going to have some angst at learning how to do this on it. Unless they clearly are doing it because they're not supporting you, then you have to make a decision where you want to go from there.
With that, I'm gonna thank everybody so much for your candor, for your kindness, for your willingness to share of yourself with this group. I'm getting emotional because there's such a lovely energy, and all the people who turned up to support their loved ones here. It's incredibly moving. I wanted just a couple notes. Your library, it's a real queer friendly place. If you haven't visited, please do. Couple things to remember is that in our library registration for a library card, we do have a spot for chosen name or preferred name. So while we do ask for a photo ID, maybe it's a driver's license, maybe you're like, oh gosh, this has my old name on it. We'll use what you have, and then we'll ask you what name, what's your preferred name? And it could be something completely different than what's on your documents, and we are very happy to do that. So your library is thinking about these things, and we are doing some things actively to improve our services to folks in the trans community. And universal design wise, this helps everyone. Another thing I want to remind you about is that we do have a queer book club that is virtual, and it meets the second Tuesday of the month. And we discuss all kinds of different titles, many lovely queer and trans specific titles are discussed with a lovely group of folks. Back in the day, 20 years ago even, there were very few books about trans folks for teens in particular, for people kind of in that moment where they're maybe really starting to come to terms with their identity. And there was one book called Parrotfish Forever. And I'm going to be honest, it's not a great book. Now there is a giant shelf of books for teens in particular with trans themes. There's one in particular named Darius the Great, and it's a great book. And his grandparents are trans. And it's just a thing. It's not a big deal in the book. It just happens to be there. One of the grandmothers used to be a man. Moving on. So visit your library, check in with us, come say hi. If you haven't gotten a card because you're feeling a little weird about, what's on your ID, take a breath. Know that we care and that we're thinking about it, and come and see us because we want to support you. The restroom thing, we are aware in the libraries. We're working on it. It's not going fast enough. It's been an issue for too long. We're aware of it. We're working on it. We hear that it's not okay the way it is, and we're working on it. If you run into issues with that in our libraries, please let us know. Find the manager. Say, hey, can I have a private conversation with you about the restrooms here, because I'm impacted by this. If you're feeling brave enough and you have it in you to state something about that, that will really help the proposals that we're working on to get these changes made. You should not have to bear that burden. If you are moved to do so, please do. But if not, we're still working on it. So many, many happy returns to everyone. Thank you so much for coming. Super big love to our amazing panel, Cassie and Cammie and Jennifer and Jana and everybody who showed out. Our incredible elders here, pioneers and people on the vanguard, Jackie, just incredible folks who turned up tonight. So thank you for everything. Come to our queer book club. There's a teen pride club for teens. If you know young people who want to get active in the community, in the library about queer stuff, we're doing it. So check it out. We do have an events calendar. I think Megan put it in the chat. Big hugs to all. See you next time. Yay, Women's History Month. Thank you all for coming.
Thank you so much for hosting. Thanks all for being here. So appreciated, everyone.
I learned so much from this conversation. Thank you.
Wonderful. Stay in touch, y'all.